Welcome to The Writing Life, the podcast for anyone who writes. My name is Peggy.
And I am Steph.
And we're speaking to you from the National Centre for Writing, our literature house in the heart of Norwich, UNESCO City of Literature.
And how are you today, Peggy?
I'm okay, thank you, Steph. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. We've got a third guest in today as well, because Rowdy the dog is sitting in the pod room with us.
Rowdy the dog is here. Hello, Rowdy.
Hi, Rowdy.
Wouldn't oblige us with a bark.
No, rude. So at the time of recording this, Peggy, you're about to set sail to Edinburgh for some events at the International Book Festival. What are you going to be up to?
Absolutely, Steph. That's really soon. So I am going up there really to chair a couple of brilliant authors. I'm going to be chatting with Denise Miner, who is no stranger, I think, to our listeners and to our audiences here in Norwich. I will be chatting to Ambrose Parry, who is a crime writing duo. It's a husband-wife pair called Chris Brookmeyer and Marissa Hatesman. And they write terrific books set in Edinburgh. I'll also be chatting to Philip Hoare, who's sharing a stage with Harriet Baker, and they are talking about their brilliant books, which are about historical lives of writers. So William Blake, and then Harriet's book is about a trio of lives who enjoyed rural life.
Wow.
So yeah, I'll be doing that, and I'll be rushing around, seeing lots of other events. I'm going to be having meetings and chats with partners and so on. So it's always a brilliant time.
We always laugh, don't we? Because it's such a busy time for you in Edinburgh. It's kind of, there's no time to eat a packet of crisps, let alone do anything else.
It's a wonderful thing though. I mean, yeah, it's busy, but you want to see everything, see everyone, absolutely lush. And you were there a couple of years ago. You got the flavour.
I did. I got a small flavour of it and thought, oh God, I think I don't know if I've got the stamina for this. I mean, it is an amazing time of year, isn't it, in the city? But you got to be prepared to keep going. During festival season. But it'll be nice to see. We see lots of pictures of you popping up on the old social media chairing events.
That'll be lovely,
won't it?
I'll be there, I imagine, on the socials. So yeah, follow along if you want to see a little slice of Edinburgh.
Absolutely.
This August. Yeah, quite enough about me though. Who do we have on the podcast today, Steph?
Well, today, Peggy, we are thrilled to be joined by Pat Barker, the Booker Prize winning author of The Ghost Road. So in this episode, Pat offers fascinating insights into the art of literary retelling, diving into the craftsmanship, research and imagination required to reimagine classic stories for a modern audience. Pat Barker was born in Yorkshire and began her literary career in her late 30s when she took a short writing course taught by Angela Carter. Can you imagine? A short course led by Angela Carter, amazing. She has published 16 novels, including her masterful Regeneration Trilogy, which includes the Booker Prize winning The Ghost Road. The Silence of the Girls was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction and won an Independent Bookshop Award in 2019. The Women of Troy was a #1 Sunday Times bestseller. The Voyage Home continues the series.
Pat sat down with our colleague Holly, head of programmes at NCW, to discuss her Regeneration Trilogy. They touch on offering fresh perspectives to Greek mythology, finding inspiration in unexpected places, and how reimaginings can make stories accessible to readers through contemporary language and references. Lovely, I can't wait for this conversation.
Sounds great, doesn't it?
Wonderful. So let's hand over to Holly in conversation with Pat Barker.
I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined on The Writing Life today by the best-selling Booker Prize winning author, Pat Barker, CBE. Pat, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So today we're going to focus largely on Pat's incredibly gripping series of novels, which vividly reimagine the classic Greek mythology of the Trojan Wars. The latest in this series is The Voyage Home. And we're going to talk about the concept of retelling, what it's like and what craftsmanship it requires to take a story that people think they know and to present it in a new way. So Pat, your last 3 novels have all taken as a starting point these great Greek epics by Homer and Euripides, but rather wondrously, it's not that very masculine, victorious version of the stories that some people think they know. Instead, you've brought us this entirely feminist retelling. I wonder if you can set the scene for The Voyage Home, but also for the wider series and tell us whose voices that we meet on the page.
I remember reading the Iliad, or starting to read the Iliad anyway, when I was quite young. And of course, what you immediately notice is that Agamemnon and Achilles are doing all these wonderful, eloquent speeches, quarreling over girls, essentially. And the girls are saying absolutely nothing. So eloquence from men, silence from the girls, whose lives they are disposing of. So I didn't feel at the time any great urge to fill in the silence, but obviously that lingered with me. It was the silence that lingered with me. But there was also a separate strand based on the character of Achilles. I read a book called Achilles in Vietnam, which was by a classical scholar who combined that with being a psychiatrist specializing in mental injuries inflicted by war, specifically in his case, the veterans of the Vietnam War. And he used the story of Achilles to cast light on the experience of the American Vietnam War veterans. And I found that book very persuasive. And obviously, I then related what he was saying about Achilles and the Vietnam veterans to what I already knew about veterans of the First World War and the mental and moral injuries that were inflicted on them, which they called shell shock.
And which you've written extensively about in your many other novels, including the Regeneration Trilogy.
Yes, so it wasn't only filling in the silence of the women, it was also exploring the character of Achilles as a man who was traumatized by war, and as so often happens, not just traumatized by the things that had happened to him, but traumatized by the things he'd done. And above all, by the loss of his dear friend, Patroclus.
That's absolutely fascinating, and a real kind of combination of voices and characters to be able to take as your starting point. And so in the first book in particular, the Silence of the Girls, we get into Achilles' head or into his experiences, but that is not through his voice. It's not through his perspective. So I wonder if you can tell us about the narrators of these novels who are women.
Well, Briseis is the only person who narrates in the first person, which is generally putting up a very obvious flag that this is who this story is about. Not always, because, like The Great Gatsby, the central character is not the narrator. But in The Silence of the Girls, the first person is meant to say, this is who the story is about.
And who is Briseis, for anyone who hasn't come across her?
Well, she was the queen of Lyrnessus until Achilles sacked her city, killed all the men, including her husband and her brothers, and took all the women as captives, all the young, fertile women as captives. The old women were sold off to slave markets, but the fertile women were taken off to be impregnated. Essentially, it was genocide. You kill all the men, you impregnate all the women, you have actually destroyed that culture.
Yeah. And so Briseis's first-person perspective that she brings us, or why was it her in particular that you felt could lead us in the way that she does in the first two books? She's quite a dominant voice, isn't she?
I think what fascinated me about Briseis was the extent of the change. She literally goes from being a queen to being, not to put too fine a point on it, a sex slave in about 48 hours, because the army awards her to Achilles, and she has watched Achilles kill, in particular, her youngest brother. And there she is in his bed, and what happens, there's no physical force involved, because resistance was obviously useless, but it is nevertheless rape. What we would call rape, what they would call Achilles exercising his rights over a captive woman.
His entitlement,
He's totally entitled, and she does not dispute his entitlement. She's enough of a woman of her own time It doesn't mean she likes him. It doesn't mean she likes what's happening to her, but she doesn't question that he is entitled to treat captive women in this way.
But how did you go about, I mean, as you've already identified, these were silent voices in the original tellings of these stories. So I wonder if you could talk a bit about how it was that, you came to give voice to Briseis.
Giving voice to Briseis, well, it's in many ways, it's a very modern voice, because there's no point. I mean, a lot of the actual incidents in that, in The Silence of the Girls, like, the rather horrible scene in which Briseis witnesses a woman being gang raped, as we would say, while her two young sons lie dying not far away, and she can't get to them. That is not my imagination. It's not Homer's imagination. That actually happened to a real woman in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's straight taken from life and put back 2,500 years.
So there's something about that feels like another element then that's perhaps influencing the way you've told these stories. Was there a desire to kind of speak to something happening now, our time now?
Yes, very much so. I can't imagine any other reason for writing, actually. And what happens to women in warfare is very much a contemporary debate. And the whole struggle to get rape recognised as a war crime, along with other unfortunate things that happen in war. And how you rehabilitate the survivors, what happens to the children who are born as a result of rape. All these things are very much contemporary issues.
So you're really using retelling of this classic story in order to bring out of the silence experiences that people can now relate to. Do you feel like you can perhaps affect change in doing this?
Oh, I don't think the relevant people waste much time reading novels by women, frankly. I suppose you can change the way... You do hope to engage with the reader at a deep enough level for them to become aware of the issues. But I'm afraid writers are very far away from the halls of power. Could I just say, too, that one of the ways in which you indicate that you are not just reading about the Bronze Age is by including deliberate anachronisms. In writing history, which is what I suppose I'm mainly known for, the Regeneration Trilogy, I worked really, really hard to try to exclude any vestige of anachronism. It was very, very much what actually happened, sometimes to actual historical people, and the time and the place and what they said about it, what they're recorded as saying about it, was being very faithfully reproduced and respected. Whereas writing myth, you have much more of a free hand. And in fact, it's almost a necessity to dislocate the reader's expectations. For example, Achilles' men sing songs while they're drinking themselves stupid after dinner or during dinner. They don't sing Bronze Age hymns to Zeus or anything like that. They sing English rugby songs. Incredibly misogynistic.
And that's interesting. Now we're sort of talking about the language you use, because I guess that is a way of making these stories feel accessible and relatable to a contemporary reader. There's a really interesting combination, though, in that kind of very contemporary dialect that you give us, but then you also kind of pepper the books with words which do feel very firmly rooted in ancient Greece. And I'm thinking about the Voyage Home and about Ritza, who I'm sure we'll come to talk about, who's the sort of narrator for the Voyage Home. And she, her job role, which kind of makes us giggle now, is known as a catch fart. I wonder if you can tell us a bit about that and how you kind of made the decision to use some of those terms which aren't well known to us now.
Well, I mean, it wasn't well known to the Bronze Age either. I think it's essentially 18th century. 18th
Okay.
century English, yes.
So we've got all kinds of multiple translation going on here.
Yeah, certainly we have, yes. Yes, it's something that servants used to, because, the Lord's personal servant, his valet, was a very... In the servant world was a very high prestige, and the other servants said catch fart, behind his back, just to express their resentment, I suppose, of his status.
But that's really interesting that you're kind of using terms and language from different periods. Was that a very conscious choice when you started thinking about how these characters were going to speak and interact, or did it just kind of evolve?
Well, I think, like most things in writing, it starts off by being unconscious, and then you notice yourself doing it, and you either say, "Don't be so stupid," and stop, or you see the potential of what you've been unconsciously doing, at which point it becomes conscious. The character of Helen, you see, because some reviewers don't like my portrayal of Helen. They think it's far too modern. And, Helen as a high status Bronze Age woman wouldn't have said that. She wouldn't have done that. And I just want to say, look, this woman was hatched from an egg. 2,000 years after her death, she's in a tavern in Cheapside, snogging Dr. Faustus. Don't tell me what Helen can and can't do. This girl can do literally anything.
Yeah, and I suppose that comes back to what you were saying about the fact that, previous books you've written have been based on history that, is well documented, and there it either did or didn't happen. But working with myth, I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about how you use those original source materials. I mean, had you always been familiar with them, and how much did you feel you had to stay true to them?
No, I didn't do Greek at all at school, and I managed to fail Latin 7 times, which was, I think, a school record. So no, I wasn't aware of them except as great stories. I didn't read the Iliad, really, apart from the first 2 chapters, until the run-up to starting to write these novels. But it's odd, because I would say that I got the idea and then started writing the novels quite quickly. But I look back at a previous book, Life Class, and there's a reference to Achilles in that. Yes, and I was completely forgotten that reference. And it's not just a passing reference, it's actually Eleanor Brooke, the central female character of Life Class, talks quite a bit about Achilles. And specifically, she relates it to the silence, because she goes to the Café Royal, which is where intellectuals in 1914 used to hang out a lot. And she says it's very odd what's happened, because the women have gone completely silent. Because, this war that is consuming everything seems not to be about them. And even the old men have stopped pontificating. Now the dominant voices are the voices of young men who are having to decide, do I volunteer? Do I wait? Things like that. So she notices that a shift into silencing women at the beginning of the war.
Which is just a fascinating parallel between what you've been able to write about with the Troy series. So I wonder whether writing from the silence of these women, do you feel that that's sort of almost a rebalancing then of history?
Yes, I think you can see the whole feminist movement, in fact, as a rebalancing of history. But also socialism. It's about. I don't like words that end in ism, because I think any word that ends in ism or ology is not going to cast a lot of light on fiction, frankly. So I don't think of myself as writing feminist fiction. I think of myself as writing fiction in which the experience of women is taken seriously and treated with respect and articulated in that way.
It's fascinating, and it's making me think about, we're talking here about, or focusing on this retelling of classic myths, but actually it perhaps, in thinking about the Regeneration Trilogy, for example, and the things you've been saying about life class as well, I wonder if retelling is just basically bringing us a story from a new vantage point.
Well, I mean, Hilary Mantel said, I don't know whether it was in her Reith lectures or somewhere else, but she said that a new point of view is a new story. And that is absolutely right. As soon as you are seeing this action from the point of view of somebody whose existence even was disregarded at the time, you are almost bound to acquire new insights into what is going on, or what was going on. It's a very perceptive remark of hers. And of course, it's what she does. As soon as Henry and his endless wives is seen from Thomas Cromwell's eyes, it becomes an entirely different story.
Thinking about those different vantage points, I wonder if we could talk a bit about Ritzer, who is the sort of lead narrator of The Voyage Home. Unlike Briseis, she wasn't a queen previously. Well, maybe you could tell us a bit about her.
Well, she isn't a queen, but she's a healer. A late husband was also a healer, and he respected her abilities and taught her everything he knew. And if you offer people extended life or freedom from pain, all doors are open to you. So Ritzer has some friends in high places and some friends in very low places as well. It's the same thing about translation, I suppose, over again. She has a decidedly Teesside accent, as I do. And, some of her aunties and her father, or our grandfather, I think it is, were very much like my grandfather and my aunties. That these women with rigid spines and corsets and, taking on the world, And my grandfather had this phrase, "Oh, he's a fine figure of a man." Or more often, she's a fine figure of a woman. And we gathered that he was a one for the ladies rather than for the men, which can't be taken for granted in ancient Greece. And because she was a professional woman, it's not the great drop that Briseis endured, but nevertheless, she's lost her home, she's lost her livelihood, and she has become a slave. She's become Cassandra's catchfart, to use the 18th century term.
Yeah. And you were saying previously about, new stories and new perspectives teaching us something new. What did you learn from Ritzer?
Well, this is quite a nice story because, where writers get particular ideas is sometimes quite amazing. I was in hospital and two of the women in the very small ward I was in had legs amputated. And the woman on my left had her stump cleaned by maggots. Once a week, the maggots came in, fastened on the stump, went in thin, came out fat. And her wound was cleaned. And I thought, this has got to be. I had no idea wounds were cleaned by maggots, but believe me, they are, in some circumstances anyway. But also I thought, this has got to be quite an ancient custom. And so when I got out of hospital, I researched it. And then I gave the experience to Ritzer, because she, in the camp, she works for the camp chief physician, McKeon, and he uses maggots to clean the wounds of people whose wounds have become infected, war wounds. So that was nice that I could take something from my contemporary life and give it to this Bronze Age slave. And she, of course, is also amazed, as I was.
That is quite astonishing. And another example of that kind of what feels like a huge gap between our contemporary culture and then these stories of ancient Greece. But actually, when it comes down to it. We all have bodies.
For some jobs, maggots are better tthan AI. Now that's very, that is quite humbling, isn't it?
It's incredibly humbling. I think I might carry that with me. Just thinking actually about the body, and particularly about Ritz's work with the sick, there is a real physicality to the way that you depict your characters. And maggots are just the tip of the iceberg. I feel a lot of descriptions are very visceral in the story. And okay, yeah, this is war, and there's blood and guts and death, but also we're up close with these women. So there's sex and childbirth and more blood. Yeah. And I suspect that it was a deliberate choice to write with that kind of intimacy, but is that fair?
Well, what do we have in common with Bronze Age men and women? The human body.
Bodies, yeah.
Yes, it is bodies. That is the ultimate truth. And I would say we also have our brains in common. It's incredible the number of otherwise intelligent people who think that previous generations were quite stupid. They were not stupid. It was exactly the same brain as we have. If anything, their powers of concentration were greater than ours, because we are messing ours up completely with smartphones and goodness knows what. They could memorize whole tracts of the Bible, for example. We can't memorize a paragraph of anything.
No, but that's fascinating, isn't it, then, that actually in this retelling, not only are we seeing great differences, but we're seeing a kind of a kindred spirit with those.
There has to be a basic similarity. If they were so different that we couldn't empathize, there would be no point writing about them at all.
And yet, I suppose, thinking about bodies, as ever and as now, some bodies are given more value than others in the story. I'm thinking it would be lovely to talk a little bit about some of the other women, particularly in the Voyage Home, because Ritzer is, as we say, the servant to Cassandra, who is going through her own very complex experiences. And yet again, we end up being able to relate to her and having sympathy for her. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Cassandra is a fascinating character. She's actually quite a difficult character. The basic story of Cassandra is that she became a virgin priestess of Apollo. Apollo wanted to go to bed with her, and unusually for Apollo, didn't just rape her. He bribed her instead. And he bribed her by giving her the gift of prophecy. He is the Lord of prophecy. That's one of his titles. He gave her the gift of prophecy by kissing her. And then he said, in effect, now can we go to bed? And she still said no. At which point he forced her mouth open and spat into her mouth to make sure that her prophecies, though always true, would never be believed. And she prophesied the fall of Troy if Helen was not sent packing. So she had the deep pain of knowing that she was warning people she loved, like her father, her mother, her brothers, about something that was inevitably going to happen. And they just didn't believe her. She even, when the Trojan horse full of Greek warriors is pushed through the gates of Troy, she was the one who said, there are people in there, push it out again. And they didn't believe that either. And that was, the downfall of Troy. So, but that, you see, she has this terrible dilemma that she always prophesies truly, but can never be believed. But, that is not really a story. It's static. It's a situation. And, novels are not about situations. They're about stories. So unless you've got a progression of events during which the progression of events is meant to change the character who is undergoing them in ways which the reader finds interesting. And like her situation, I did find Cassandra hard to write about because she was static. She was entirely, she wanted Agamemnon to die. She believed, because of a prophecy about his death, that she had to be there in order to ensure that his death actually happened. Her motive is revenge for the death of her father, her mother, her brothers, the sisters, and the enslavement of her sisters, and the destruction of Troy. She wants him dead, and she will do anything to bring that about. But in fact, it's his wife who kills him. It's not Cassandra. Yeah.
So there's multiple layers of silencing going on, because even for somebody who does have a voice, not being believed is, I don't know, perhaps even worse.
Yes, there are lots of, there's, I don't know whether you've ever watched the Fast Show, but there is a character, a character in there, played by, her name won't come, but, a very good comic actress, whom the men just don't hear. She makes a very interesting, sensible suggestion about something, and about 5 minutes later, some man puts it forward, and she's ignored, and everybody gathers round him and say, "Wow, what a brilliant idea!" Well, I mean, that was Cassandra's experience her whole life. There were even times when she gave her twin brother her prophecies to see if he would be listened to. And although, he didn't do any good, they did listen to him at least.
This is what I love about your approach to the books. I mean, these very contemporary references and touch points and language and, depiction of the bodies are it feels like a gift that you're able to make these stories accessible and available to readers. To be honest, like myself, who I've struggled to engage with the Greek myths before, and it can feel very remote to lots of readers, and yet you're bringing these stories to an entire new readership. I mean, is that something you sort of considered when you started writing, or is it that come after?
I think that's come after. I think it's a gift to me to feel that I've been able to do that, along with a lot of other people. I think there is a general upswelling of interest in those stories, perhaps because our own stories seem to be so transitory. I mean, the number of stories on television on a particular night is absolutely overwhelming. But for how long do you remember them? Very, very few of these stories break through and are still being talked about even 2 or 3 months later, let alone 2,000 or 3,000 years later. It's the quality. You've got to feel the cloth. These are great stories, and they deserve to be told and retold for every generation that can benefit from them.
And you're right that it does feel like a very popular phenomenon almost in recent years. I mean, you're not, this idea of retelling the classics, I mean, you're not alone. There are writers like Madeline Miller and Natalie Haynes, Jennifer Saint, now even Margaret Atwood, really, really popularising stories that perhaps they are fantastic stories and they bear retelling, but perhaps some people have felt previously weren't for them. Yes. And I wonder if you ever think about or considered that, or perhaps there has been a kickback from the kind of more traditional classic scholars who believe that the stories should stay as they originally were.
Yeah. Well, I always think, Homer belongs in the classics department to exactly the same extent as William Shakespeare belongs in the English department. We mustn't let them out. They are too dangerous.
And yet that's exactly what you've been able to do for us. It really, really is a gift. I wonder, just thinking about retelling, if there are more stories to come from the Trojan War for you. Because I think the books you've written so far have sometimes been presented as a trilogy, but I'm hopeful that they're more of a series and there's more to come.
There may be more to come. I don't know at the moment because I'm in the closing stages of a very weird book that I'm doing with my daughter, and we don't even know what to call it. So until that is put to bed, I think. I won't be able to focus on what I want to do next. I also want to write some contemporary things, short stories possibly.
If there was one story you could retell, though, do you have a sense of who that might be? If there was another story, to tell from the Trojan War?
Well, I don't know about another story. I'd have to think very deeply about that. I think there's a scene in which Andromache, who is the wife and then the widow of Hector, says to Briseis, "How are we supposed to love their children?" Because Andromache and Briseis are both pregnant as a result of rape. And that is, at any period of the world's history, that has got to be a terrible dilemma for that woman. So how do they negotiate that? Andromache is pregnant by the man who killed her baby. I wouldn't want to do it from Andromache's point of view, because I just think that is so awful. I can't see any way that could be resolved.
Just thinking about what you said at the beginning about the very contemporary stories of war crime that kind of fed into you feeling you wanted to write these stories. I wonder if you see the series and sort of retelling war stories more generally as perhaps a way of being able to right some wrongs of the past, or sort of shine a light on them.
Well, I think Tony Harrison, articulation is the tongue tides fighting. I think just articulating things. And there's the lovely story about Anna Akhmatova was standing in a queue of women visiting their sons, husbands, whatever, in one of Stalin's prisons. And it was a dreadful, freezing cold, dead of Moscow winter. And sometimes these women were turned away just as they got to the head of the queue. And a woman turned to Anna Akhmatova and said, can you describe this? And Anna Akhmatova replied, "Yes, I think I can." And the woman smiled.
Incredible. So bringing us the stories is enough, and we have to see what happens to them once they're up.
Yeah, so having read the stories, you may be inclined to do something slightly different. Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm afraid books do change lives. I've had people in queues at book festivals say to me, "This book changed my life." And I just think, bloody hell, what a responsibility. I really did not ask for it.
But you are able to meet it and to bring us these incredible stories. So thank you. And thank you for your time and just sharing some insights into how you do it and how you approach these retellings. Really, really grateful for your time today, Pat Barker.
And thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed it.
A big thank you to Pat Barker and to Holly Ainley for their time. If you have any questions or you'd like to get in touch with us, you can find us at Writers Centre on Instagram and Blue Sky. We're on Facebook, and you can sign up to the NCW newsletter at nationalcentreforwriting.org.uk. As a UK registered charity, we rely on the generosity of our supporters to make our work possible. You can make a donation on the website by going to the Support Us page. And if you enjoyed today's episode as much as we did, please do consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a 5-star rating and a review, because this helps other writers to find us. Thanks again, keep writing, and we'll catch you on the next episode.